Okay, there we go. Uh, Sarah's not letting me live stream.
Oh, it's not?
It says the user is not enabled for live streaming.
Okay. Do you want to make
So
me
do you want me
host
to
and
do it to a
I'll
different YouTube, like you be able to say now or something, or do you want?
um hmm.
So I don't know why that message came up, but
Yeah,
anyway.
I'm not sure either. There must be a setting in there that I didn't
Did
realize.
you?
Yeah, do you want to go ahead and just do it to one of your others and then
Oh, we can
you
figure this out later.
yeah, that
Oh,
sounds like a
okay.
good plan. Thank you.
Sorry, I didn't mean for the. I didn't know I was gonna.
Yeah, I didn't know I was gonna do that either. Hmm.
Okay, let's start over. Okay, welcome everybody to another episode of Street Smart Success with our friend Robert Butwin. Uh, but Kurt, what do you have to say today before we get to Robert?
What I have to say is I always look forward to the second and the fourth Friday with our friend Robert Butwin, coming from Street Smart Success, giving you in this series possibilities to prosperity. And so I'm the top of the batting order, folks. We're going to get you kicked off here. We do this in edutainment fashion. We've got the four power players here. So we have four Possibilities to Prosperity, the founder of the whole thing, and the partner with me, Robert Butwin, and my partner in life, Sue Roskoff. And then we have my partner in podcasting, podcast engineer, virtual assistant scheduler, Emily Gomer. So the four of us are going to do a little carouseling, or in my house, we call it the lazy Susan, where you just keep spinning and you keep going
Ooh.
round and round until you get what you're looking for. So here we are. We're with the World of Ability Podcast Network, and we're partnered with Easy Way Network, and we've got On the Mark TV. And so this was inspired out of a conversation between our friend Mark Balin and Robert Butwin, and that's how these things roll. Is we get talking and we mastermind and we buddy up and we help each other build that reciprocity. And as people keep talking, ideas come forward. And so Robert came to me and said, "Hey, Kurt, our buddy Mark says there's some untapped potential between us. So what do you think?" And, it was a more broad-based conversation than just doing this series, but this is the crux of it because we're so excited about what's going on. We want to bring it out to you. So welcome to all this viewing. So, Robert, our friend, we can't help but win with you, Robert Butwin. So, what's your winning message today?
Well, first of all, before I get into my winning message, I never knew you were such a comedian. For those of you, for those of you that might not catch it, Kurt's opening remark, his wife is Susan. So, you know, anyhow, that's a whole other thing. What is my winning message? And, I take a look at prosperity and why more people are not prosperous. And there's a variety of different things, but I think it really starts off with the 6 inches between your ears. The way you look, the way you think, and just not even believing in synchronicity. I look back at where I started in relationship to where I am now. And where I started, it was a freak, somebody, somehow I came across a cassette tape series by Wayne Dyer, How to Be a No Limit Person. And unfortunately, sometimes people limit themselves based on whatever their belief is one way or the other. And in the word belief, right in the middle of that word is the word lie. And many of the things that we believe are the truth are holding us back and just not taking that chance. Part of it is synchronicity. Did did I ever mention, because I hate repeating our stories because obviously a lot of these will be in archives, however you want to use it, how I met my wife in that whole story?
No,
Well,
no, what's this all about?
well, it's part of, prosperity. It's like getting outside of your comfort level, question yourself one way or the other, the questions you ask. And at the time, I was running a nightclub in the Twin Cities. It was called the Oz. And, before I got married, um, I loved, and I had this vision of someday wanting to get married, but I loved dating. I had a lot of different dates, but I was always curious who would ever need to resort to putting an ad in the personals? This was before there was online dating. So out of curiosity, because again, sometimes just stepping outside of your comfort level, asking the questions as it relates to whatever you might be thinking. So out of curiosity, I put an ad in the Twin City Reader. And I think there was like, it cost me I mean, I don't remember what the ad cost. It was next to nothing. For anybody that responded, it cost them $1 to respond. And so I got like 33 different responses of people one way or the other. And I had this super ego and I was always, it was just out of curiosity. And so one of the people that responded is the lady I ended up actually marrying. But what part of the uniqueness of the story is on the first time when we first met, in the first 45 minutes, she came to the realization she was never going to see me again. you know, and part of it, I was incongruent. I showed up. It wasn't, to me, it was weird just going to go see the parade of homes. This is where a lot of the people, and I showed up at the time. You know how you have these swings, peaks, valleys. Showed up in a citation with a dented thing. I was wearing baseball shorts. Uh, this was back then. I had a $20 gold piece on my neck. I had a diamond horseshoe, sort of like incongruent. So, and I'm talking about these dreams of where I saw things going. So, and it was totally outside of his world, outside of the world. And sometimes we act unconsciously incompetent. We don't know why we did it. So, what I did is I flashed her. Now, for those of you listening, get your mind out of the gutter. This is not a R-rated thing. Flashing, she had just gotten done taking a body language class, and raising your eyebrows is what they call flashing. And so it's a universal sign. Yeah, just like Sue just did. It's a universal sign you like somebody. And so I don't know what I was doing, but in her mind, she says, maybe I better give this guy a second chance. Now, 41 years later, we're still happily married. A lot of my success, just like, you, Kurt, most of your success is because of your partner. One person that you meet along the way can have a significant positive impact because I can look at throughout my career that one person, and again, I wasn't looking to necessarily find, my thought wasn't, okay, I'm going to, go in the state, I might find the lady I'll marry, but, we just do something. We believing in synchronicity. We started off this, the conversation, you know, Mark made a suggestion based on whatever we had been circling around in similar orbits, so to speak. I was always here in her orbit, but we had been circling around in these orbits, and somebody makes a suggestion and you act on it. And then it's a lot of it goes back to luck. And for those of you that know me, I love acronyms. Luck is laboring under correct knowledge. So sometimes those, being lucky and laboring under correct knowledge, or just getting outside of your comfort level or doing something different. And part of my purpose of why I wanted to do this, because early in my career I was chasing money, but I was at an event, and one of the guys that was running the event, he asked the question, which is what is the meaning of life? And without thinking, the guy said to live a life of meaning. It sort of like shifted how I looked at everything. Because we're all going to have two B days, a birthday and a box day. And in between, there's a dash. And it's like, what was the impact? How did we, what was our life worth? What was our life? What was the value of living? It's like my mom passed away about 2 years ago. She was a narcissist. And it's like, I look at the things, as it even relates to the lady I married. She was totally opposite, giving, kind. I didn't want to meet. I didn't want to marry anybody like my mom. She had four sons. Three of the four have nothing good to say about her. But it's what did you learn from the experiences? Anyhow, I've been talking. I don't, I've thrown out a lot of things we can take from the things I've already started talking about. Because again, this is sort of like a round table. We're sort of like ad-libbing and just sharing perspectives and insights that can be of value to people that will listen to this. So I'll let the other people have a conversation. So I've thrown out a lot.
I was gonna say I kind of glommed onto the one of the words you said was curiosity. And that is something that I think is a little underrated because being curious about things really gets you down. Notice what makes you curious because there's a whole, I mean, we got things going past us all the time and you don't clue into things and all of a sudden something's going to grab your attention and you're curious about it. And that's where you kind of go down that road. And I think just noticing those pieces, noticing what grabs your attention can speak quite loudly to yourself. When you're not sure which way to go, and you can actually clue in a little bit to those pieces. That I think that's very meaningful, actually, and it's very small. It can be kind of subtle, but truly, I think that can give some insights when you're, especially when you're kind of floundering and trying to figure out what do you want to do, where do you want to go, what's next. Pay attention to what things spark your interest as you encounter things.
Definitely. Kurt?
Yeah. Yeah, we're gonna go on the buzzword of curiosity. I talk a lot about, from other people, I put it together that as we navigate our own life, going on our own trajectory, keeping within the rails of, how we're getting to our own perceived destination, you think about it, you look at how much it's a heart-driven life, and then the idea of going with your gut feeling, and then, our bodies contain our soul. And, so on this session, we have four souls. Emily, don't go away. Where are you going, Emily? All right, Emily's got to take a quick little break. But, curiosity to me, what that does as ourselves with each other or another person, if we're going to talk about curiosity that way about someone else, it to me it opens up the space when somebody can sense your curiosity. That's to me a welcoming energy because when they sense you're curious, and if you look at our favorite topic is ourselves, right? So when somebody senses that you're curious about them, now they feel welcome in your space, everything that you are. They can sense your mind. I talk about like with Star Trek, like the Vulcan mind grip, like you're kind of reaching out to, tap with their experience. I think people appreciate that. And I think it adds the right energy, in contrast to, how we can make a mistake, because growing up, as a teenager, and just kind of how I experienced it. I just chose to observe how I would listen to people, and then I would be thinking, everybody's talking, and I felt like I had a hard time getting a word in edgewise. So I took it on to be like the craft of getting the microphone, get in the air, and what that did is that took me on a trajectory which didn't serve me well until, so the story for me is one day I go to a mastermind group being picked up by a guy that introduced himself to me, seeing this mastermind group, and I helped him get set up to go to the mastermind group. And then he not only planned on going there, he offered to me to pick me up on his way. And so we go to this mastermind group, and I became self-conscious because by the time we got there and I'm realizing we're coming close and he's going to need my help to find parking space, I realized I just talked his ear off, pretty much the whole way there. And then it comes to be that here, this is what this gentleman's business is all about. He teaches people about the curiosity dialogue. It's more about being interested compared to being interesting. Because that's what a lot of people get into, especially with if we're going to talk about MLMs or direct selling or home businesses, is we have our thing and we feel that our thing, our item, our service, our technology, our AI, whatever it is, our book, Street Smart Success, it's so great. We just want to go out there and tell everybody about it. And some people talk about that to be like puking on people. So that brings us back to the curiosity. That's something to really think. How curious are we about that next person? So what do you think, Robert?
From everything that you just said, there's so many different directions I can take it, especially with everything happening in the world today, and again, there's so much misinformation. But, we're in, any way you want to look at it, everything gets down to the human relationships. So being curious, asking those thought-provoking questions, one way or the other, because to me, I don't look at anything failing. I look at everything as a test. It's like, how is this, no matter what happens, how is this here to serve me? From marketing, everything is a test one way or the other. So I'm focused on, and there again, curiosity. Why is it happening? How is this going to benefit me in relationship, no matter what it is that I do? Now, we're talking about the human to human. Then we take a look at that entrepreneurial journey. It's like, I, anytime, because part of how I see things benefiting myself, even when they're not working out, no matter what it is, it's like, you know, as I was going through that process, I knew I was going to be a great mentor to other people. And knowing that I experienced certain things, I would be able to be more empathetic, be able to listen better. You're talking about, and a lot of what you are saying is just getting wiser through experience. You know, you talked about grabbing the mic. You know, I used to do that a lot. Then you start realizing the more questions you can ask, the more you can listen, you can figure out how to be of more value. So, I mean, there's so much wisdom as it relates to the things that you said, but everything still gets down to relationships. We talk about prosperity, I look at the four pillars of prosperity: health, wealth, relationships with yourself and others, and how you want to take a look at mindset, spirituality, whatever that means to yourself. Um, so, and sometimes you got to sit back and question, especially with everything happening in the world today as we're at the beginning of the April. Some people say we're on the verge of World War III. Others, I don't believe it is. There's so much curiosity about the uncertainty of what's going to be happening, but the only thing that we can be certain about is the things that we can have an impact on. No matter what happens, it's like, how are we making a difference where we can make that difference? That's what we're doing here, the second and fourth Friday. We're not here, from my perspective, and I'm sure from your perspective, just spending time in creating information that you can catalog and, for whoever might be listening to it, wherever they're going to listen to it, we want to make a difference based on getting people more clarity so that they're not curious, so that they realize that they can take control or have an impact in their life and making their life meaningful. So again, I'm just talking. Hopefully it's in relationship and relevant to the different points that everybody else is, you know, making. And for those of you that are just listening, we invite you to join us. You know, the more the merrier. We want to hear from other people. You know, be it if you send us some, send us some kind of a text or join us live.
Because like you said, we are here every second and fourth Friday of the month. So opportunity is always here to join us. And if this is not the best time, there's other shows you can join in as well. But this particular one has definitely has a flavor that is unique. And I'm so excited actually, Robert, that you're here doing this because this is something that I keep coming back to the curiosity piece because you have such an interesting background. All the things that you've done and like you were saying, like the wisdom that you've gathered over time because how do we get wisdom? By making lots of mistakes and by doing lots of things and all, and that's how we get to where we're going. Because I remember way back, it's like I was scared to fail. I don't want to fail at things. I don't want to make mistakes, but you know what? That's some of the best life lessons that come down is when that does happen. Because if everything was always roses and perfect, that's not that it's I don't know if boring's the right word, but it's so much more interesting and rich when things happen that are unexpected and you get to figure out what's next. How do you deal with that? What am I going to do now? That's the resilience that comes from doing things is invaluable.
There you go. Yeah, it takes doing things. I kind of spoke up about Emily when she left. So, Emily, if you're able to come on
She
back
said she'll
here,
be
but
back in a
just
few minutes.
okay, all right. So, to kind of gear up for her return, let's go ahead and recap the story behind Emily being here. So basically, the story goes is in 2020, March 2020. This is early in March before they did the lockdown and stay safer at home and everything. We got in an advocacy event in the state of Wisconsin in Madison at the state capitol, and so we were going in the legislators' offices and all the stuff, visiting a representation, and so as part of the event, we got gathered in the dome area, the big gathering area in the center of the Capitol. And there was a gentleman who approached me. I was on the perimeter of the big circle gathering, and this gentleman approached me. And at the time, in 2020, he was running for lieutenant governor of the state of Wisconsin, and he was trying to figure out what was going on with their group. And I said, it's an advocacy group, everything I just told you about going to the legislator's office and, Madison Advocacy Day by organizations that serve people with disabilities across the state of Wisconsin. And, um, and then I told them we're doing a radio show, Ability MK Now, which we still do. Sue continues to host that on Wednesday evenings. And so he thought of somebody that he knows, this Anne Marie Oblivion, to be on our show. So I go that direction. I'm in contact with Anne Marie Oblivion. And then it comes to be that she has an executive assistant. And that the name of Anna Marie Oblivion's executive assistant is Emily Gomer. So I'm working with Emily to coordinate Anna Marie Oblivion to be on our show. And so we did all that stuff with prosperity pathways and onward and upward. But then it came to a point where Emily's assignment, trying to think of what were the PPP loans and so forth. So Emily had basically a temporary opportunity, with these organizations and with Anna Marie, and that came to an end. And Emily was a little displaced, but we had already set into place with Anna Marie Oblivion. She helped us form H&P Wisconsin. That's where we met Edwin or Robert. Yeah, we met Edwin, but Robert here we met through Happy Neighborhood Project, and you know, so and then eventually Sue became part of the co-host team at H&P Wisconsin, and so Emily is very much a reserved person. She likes the VA work. the podcast assisting, not as much the hosting, and to do scheduling and so forth. Emily's very much a behind the scenes person, but with co-hosting, we had our friend Fong Vo and Aaron Justice from HMP, coached us as co-host teams, and Emily got quite an experience. And it was remarkable the feedback that Emily was getting based on first meeting her in the fall of 2020, co-hosting H&P Wisconsin, and then 2020, 2021, Ian Kingwell from Australia, is in one of the meetings making a comment about how strikingly, um, Emily obviously grew in her confidence to do such a thing, to come into groups of business people and to participate. Because before that, Emily was doing, I'm trying to think if it was food service, but there's definitely healthcare. I think she worked at like grocery stores and so forth. And she did assisted living,
Yeah,
services and so forth. So to come in and do entrepreneurship, a very different thing, for Emily. So pretty soon we'll have Emily come in here and comment about her journey of the last 6 years and what it meant to her.
well,
But you never know what kind of experience you're gonna give people, and it's those type of things that put what you do to the test. Being able to take people, and that's what the home business thing is all about. You
yeah,
don't know what background people have, but it's got to work. It's got to be duplicatable, replicatable, and easy. Right, Robert?
yeah. You bring up, and I want to comment about some of the.
We need the Blackstone turned on. Can you help us?
No, I can't right now. I want about 10 minutes. Um, Anyhow, you bring out some very valuable points. Part of it is being comfortable being uncomfortable. Part of the meaning in relationship to what it is that we do and seeing the people that we have an impact and evolve. I remember, and this is part of how our journey serves us, which is what you were just talking about. The journey that we go through, the journey that other people go through. I remember the first time, and we've talked a little bit about MLM, and I'm very pro MLM, and I like the uh, acronym of MLM, which is making life meaningful. But when I first got involved in MLM back in 1984, I flew down to Houston, Texas, and I was the only person in the area that I lived in that flew down there. And ultimately, when I got back, everybody wanted to know what happened at the convention. So the guy that was the main guy in the area calls me up on stage, and I'm supposed to tell everybody in the first, whatever, 30 seconds, my knees buckled, my eyes were back in my head, and he had to bring me off a stage. But, taking that forward, and we're talking about that evolution, even though I had been on stage because of my success in MLM for a long period of time, in 19, not 19, in 2020, March 2020, when everything went from in-person to Zoom, it was a whole nother learning experience. Even though it's comfortable, but it's learning to be comfortable, in front of the camera. And up until 6 months ago, I used to have what they call droopy eyes. And again, this is part of that self-talk, the 6 inches between your ears. And I would look in the camera and it looked like I was sleeping, sort of like, I got to be careful of what I say, sort of like how our president seems to look quite often when he's caught on camera dozing off, and we'll leave that alone. But in the meantime, the same thing myself. I was looking, with my eyes, but you take a look at the evolution that we all go through, or should be going through, and how it serves us, and how we see the evolution of other people. It's like even when I was dating my wife, and we talk about introvert extroverts. Most people don't realize or what my wife would look at as an introvert. I'm a situational extrovert. You know, being learn to be comfortable, uncomfortable, and that's part of the whole process that we go through. And that's part of the meaning when we see the person going from what you're describing, crawling, what a baby does, to where they get up and walk, and before you know it, they're out sprinting and running miles, and everybody, we all have that in us as entrepreneurs, and that's what we started off talking about, possibilities, because there's many different possibilities to creating that kind of ideal life, which is prosperous, whatever that means to a person.
Yeah. Yeah. So Sue, you want to speak a little bit to, you're here doing this stuff with us in your moonlighting role. You've got your daytime, your main gig at Carroll University, working in the life sciences, biology, teaching intro to biology labs, working with work study students, and then when you leave the university campus and return home, you're in kind of a bizarro world or whatever, but just a different gambit, to be on the networking meetings, connecting the easy way, co-hosting with us at the Happy Neighborhood Project. You want to talk about that a little bit? Kind of living that duality of a scientist on one side and media mogul on the other.
Well, I kind of clued into that the phrase of being comfortable with being uncomfortable because that kind of is my journey into here. I remember back when was it about almost a dozen years ago now when Kurt and a core group really started with the radio show and the opportunity was right in front of me. It's like if I wanted to grab a mic, I could, and I'm like, nope. That was not where I was. That was not happening. I think I remember one time when I was like, maybe I can do this, and I got so incredibly nervous and anxious. I'm like, why am I? This is not that big a deal, but it was too much. I was like, I was so uncomfortable, and that over time has changed, right? I've gotten to where I enjoy being on screen with folks. I don't feel like, like when we're doing the radio show now, it looks just like this because we are doing it on Zoom. The radio show comes in and picks up the feed from here. It's something where I look back at all of the amazing people that I've had the pleasure of meeting and talking to and asking questions. How on earth would that have ever happened if it wasn't for being in that position that I've now found myself in? And after all this time of getting that practice of being able to be uncomfortable, and try, but it all comes together, right? It's something where you find the fun, you find the good in what you're doing, and if you don't, if I really didn't like it, I'd say, hey, I'm done, right? But I have kind of fallen in love with doing this and having this opportunity to talk to people in a totally different way, which some people coming in, they come in and they're at that point where they're so nervous they're not sure, like, just it's fine, we're just having a conversation, it's all good, it's gonna be fun, let's go. So you don't know where things are going to take you, and if it wasn't, again, when you think about our path getting even here, that it started with it started with water skiing and then adaptive water skiing and all these stepping stones from there to here, like that all of a sudden is that we're doing this. What? It's an interesting story, and it wasn't that long ago. I actually had the privilege of doing a talk on trusting your journey and really trusting that you're going in the right direction. And, when you talk about go with your gut, if your gut's saying this is a good way to go, follow it because it's there for a reason. You innately somehow know where to go. If you're truly are feeling like this is the way I should be heading, go there. Because I can think of times in my life where my gut was saying, stay away, don't do this. And I didn't listen to it. And I regret that, decisions that were made that, perhaps were made out of fear, they were in the wrong place. And, if I could go back and change things, but, again, that's how you learn. That's how you grow and gain the wisdom. And we all make mistakes, and that's okay. That's part of the journey. But yeah, to have the opportunity to do all this, it's I don't know. I think I've hit your question mostly there, Kurt, because my brain totally went down this road here. But I know Emily's back now too, so I want to give her a chance to talk. But Kurt, you want to go ahead and set that up?
Yeah, so Emily, we're looking for you to comment to this bizarro world that you've entered here, warming up to sit in your seat as VA, podcast engineer, scheduler, and things with HMP and all the groups and all the podcasts you do. Kind of you want to share your own experience of the last 6 years, how you'd sum it up, and tell us what in the world does Robert Butwin have to do with anything you do? You've got an engineering flaw there, Emily. There we go.
There.
Uh, what do I have to say about it today? Uh, it's been a rather interesting, uh, but fun journey. Um, can sort of relate to sort of what Sue was saying, to extend with kind of the like introverted part of the side of things. Um, no, if you guys knew me, I mean, I know I've gotten better over the last 6 years with. I mean, it's just still kind of hard, but it's I'm getting better than I was used to. So there's always uh growing experience, which has been a big growing experience. So in terms of that, and then meeting all the people I've met through the Happy Neighborhood Project, and so it's been and then meeting Robert, and so it's been fun.
So, Emily, what in the world does Robert have to do with anything you do? When you look at Robert, like what is he to your world?
Um, yeah, I'll just have another podcast or add to our podcasting world, for one
Doing
thing.
this, you mean? Doing this series you're talking about?
Uh-huh.
Yep.
That's one thing anyway. And then probably introducing us to like other people and Jim Feldman and others and someone I
Yeah,
might not have
when
known otherwise.
Robert's not around, do other people mention him in conversations with you when he's not around?
I think they have, yes.
Yeah, yeah.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, that's what we've learned. Robert is a talked about gentleman. So
Yeah,
Robert, we're gonna bring it
he's
back.
very popular.
Well,
Yep.
let's because my wife sort of called me, so let's come to conclusion. But let me wrap a couple things up because the key in everything is the team. One person cannot do it by themselves, and I love the acronym of team. Together, everybody achieves mastery. And you need all the different people coming together with a similar vision and locking arms. And part of what Sue was talking about, because the world, one of the cassette tape series I listened to many years ago, don't remember what was on any of the what the point of the person that talked about was on it, but the headline of the tape series was great, which is how to zig in a zagging world. The world's going to continually, and it's how we recognize and adapt, stay focused on the vision, which is creating a life of meaning, prosperous, whatever that might mean to you, one way or the other, understanding synchronicity, why different relationships come together in a way that's helping, because how to have an impact, because nobody, you know, none of us are going to get out of this world alive. It's what kind of impact we can have, during our time here on this planet. And, anyhow, that's as much as I want to say. And however anybody else wants to wrap it up, but we will be back. I know the fourth Friday of the month. And anybody else has any closing comments? Otherwise, I know my wife's got some things she needs my help on.
All right, yeah, that'll do it for today. Thanks, Robert, for being here, and that's how we do it. We set aside the time that we have, and we give it our all. And we're here for you out there, all of you watching and listening. And thanks for being a part of our fan club here. And please do share out. that we do this on Fridays, live at 5 Pacific time, 7 Central, and so that'll be April 24th. We'll be back here for the next conversation, and my phone number if you want to interact with me between now and then for anything I can help you with. My number is 262-372-1754, and shoot out email to me, Kurt, Kurt, at projectdiehard.org. That'll do it for today, Emily. Get us on out of here. That's a wrap.
Thank you, everybody. See you next time.
Thank you. I'll see you next time. Kurt, you might want to check that out, or Sue.